Welcome to the Publish Her podcast, a place where you can come to get inspiration, motivation, help, encouragement, and support in your journey to write, publish, and sell your book. Hosted by Alexa Bigwarfe.
'Cause I've been where you've been, and I felt what you're feeling, and I don't want to get in your way.
All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of the Publish Her podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about the fun world of preparing a successful nonfiction book pitch package. For those of you who are looking to pitch your book, what you need to know, the processes you need to follow, and all of those good things. We're going to dig into that today. My guest today is Amy L. Bernstein. She writes stories that let readers feel while making them think. Her novels include The Potrero Complex, The Nighthawkers, Dreams of Song Times, and Fran, The Second Time Around. She's an award-winning journalist, speechwriter, playwright, and certified nonfiction book coach. Amy also teaches writing workshops and is a frequent guest on podcasts to discuss writing, publishing, and creativity. Her nonfiction book, Wrangling the Doubt Monster, Fighting Fears, Finding Inspiration, is going to be published in October 2024. That sounds like a phenomenal book to have as well, with all of the issues that come around mindset and fear and all of that. So welcome to the show, Amy.
Thank you, Alexa. I'm really glad to be here. And fortunately, Wrangling Doubt Monster is coming out in September, I think, and not even October. So people don't even have to wait as long.
That is so exciting. Congratulations on that. You've got quite a few books under your belt there. It looks like you write a lot of fiction.
I do, but I really do both. I have a very long background in professional nonfiction, almost everything that you can think of, from executive speech writing to writing for public radio and newspapers, and heavy duty communications in government and nonprofits. And so that's why I have a particular fondness for the nonfiction side of things. But then there's the fiction side of my brain, which I have to let out every once in a while as well.
No, but it's really good. I think the expertise that you gain as being a novelist also rolls over into success factors for nonfiction writers, because, you know, as I talk about in our marketing things too, like almost anything you hear someone say can be applied to multiple genres. You just have to know how to shift whatever the focus is or the audience or all of those things to make it applicable for what you're doing. So certainly through your process of learning how to write, publish, and sell books can directly translate in how you work with nonfiction authors in their journey as well.
That's so true, Alexa, because really at the end of the day, it's all storytelling.
Mhm.
And it's great to understand how storytelling works in fiction, because exactly as you say, a lot of those same techniques can apply very much in nonfiction.
Absolutely. And especially with marketing and getting the book out there. I mean, it's a really, I don't think there's any marketing that you could say this only applies. Well, that's not true, but this only applies to nonfiction or this only applies to fiction. Obviously, there's going to be some subsets that are more likely to work for nonfiction authors than fiction authors. But at the end of the day, if we're looking at marketing through the lens of growing readership, telling your story throughout different mediums that you have available to you, sharing those stories, those insights, and then being able to build a following. I'm sure that your book marketing tools as a fiction author definitely have helped you become better at the marketing on all angles. So
Yeah, you could sort of look at it as like there's the inside side of marketing and the outside. And by inside, I mean is what does it take for the author to get their property literally to an agent or to a publisher and into a contract. That's like the inside side of it. The outside side is, okay, now this book's going to be real. How does this book find its readers? There's a lot of commonality between fiction and nonfiction on the outside side of that process.
mhm.
On the inside side, which is the author trying to make that connection to someone who will represent or publish their book, that's where things are a bit different. And that, in fact, is where the proposal comes in on the nonfiction side.
Well, let's get right into it then, since you queued that up so perfectly. So let's talk about how to prepare a successful nonfiction book pitch package. And the first question I would have before we get into the logistics around what you're doing and how you're preparing it is,
Mhm.
who should even consider, there's a lot of back and forth
Right.
on if you're an entrepreneur or if you're a coach or
Right.
if you're doing these things where you've already built an audience, do you even need to pitch? And who do you coach to say, I think this would be better self-published, or maybe you should find a hybrid publisher, or pitching your book is the right step for you?
Right, right. So there's a lot to unpack in what you just asked. You asked all the questions that people ask all the time, right? So let me see if I can let me step into sort of some of these things one at a time. If you are aspiring to write a commercial nonfiction book, which is to say, just to sort of like be extremely explicit, you're going to report something that's true and real, right? And this can be like a really weighty tome that draws on, lots of deep research. It can be very technical, or it can be a little bit more light and sort of pop psychology, but still very much grounded in sort of reality and truth and practice and that kind of thing, and requires some research. Well, then you're writing commercial nonfiction, and you are going to need to go through the traditional nonfiction book proposal pitching process. If you are um, a super high-end celebrity, if you're Barack Obama, you don't, the agent will come to you and say, listen, here's the deal we're going to offer you, and you don't have to do any of that in the same way, right? But that's not what we're not that's not the real world for almost all of us. So you can't escape that. Where this gets muddy is in memoir. And a
Mm,
lot of people today are so interested in memoir. And memoir is a really strange beast because, on the one hand, it's nonfiction, but it really also follows a lot of the rules of fiction with character development and telling story and withholding information and building suspense. Memoirs do a lot of that, even though you're telling an essentially true story. Memoirs also often use the same nonfiction pitch process as other nonfiction, except for when they don't.
mhm.
And sometimes it can look a little bit more like a fiction query, and that's going to get down into weeds that we probably don't want to really go into. But I wanted to make it clear that there are some distinctions and muddy places here. And when I'm talking about the nonfiction book proposal, the classic strong sales document that really makes an agent's or a publisher's eyes light up that they're really interested in this book, that's really about kind of, let's just talk about straight ahead commercial nonfiction, not of the memoir variety, because it just makes it a lot cleaner.
Yeah, I would agree. And memoir in itself can be so tricky because while it is
Yeah.
getting a lot of attention, that also means that it's very, very competitive to even try to
Yes.
find an agent. And from what
Yes.
I've heard from the agents that I've spoken with, that generally, unless the person is famous, they're probably going to be a no for them from the memoir side, because it's just too hard to sell at a mass quantity. I remember one of the agents we interviewed a couple years ago in the Women in Publishing Summit said that, like, even very famous people. She said Whoopi Goldberg at the time had launched her memoir, and it didn't even sell to the level that they had hoped or expected. And so, if Whoopi Goldberg is having a struggle selling her memoir, this isn't to say, memoirists, because I know we have a lot in our community, that it's not worth your time and energy to write your book. It's just that probably the self-publishing route is going to be the best for you, so you need to learn all the things that you can to make sure you're growing your audience and marketing so that you can
Yeah.
see the success that you're looking for. And it
And
is possible.
yeah. Yeah. And a quick sidebar to exactly what you're saying. There's a big difference between a fan and a reader. A
Mhm.
fan is someone who likes, let's say it's Whoopi Goldberg or Taylor Swift, it doesn't matter. They adore that person. They love their art. They love the personality. They'll watch them on any program. They'll listen to their output. They'll watch them in any movie. They'll buy all their albums. All that things. Those are fans. Fans are not necessarily the same people as readers and
Right.
book buyers. And what the
Right.
big publishers, the mistake they keep making again and again, is they throw these multi-million-dollar advances at celebrities who they have 10 million followers on whatever it is, TikTok, it doesn't matter. Those people aren't buying and reading books. So it's
Right.
not the same. Those audiences are not aligned. So yes, many people are, in fact, who are writing memoir today who are not known. They are choosing to self-publish, or they're going with a reputable hybrid publisher where they are helping to invest in their own publishing future. Um, and those are very valuable options if you're really compelled to tell your story. But again, that is not the person who's putting together this kick-ass
Mhm.
nonfiction book proposal. That's like different kettle of fish.
Absolutely. Okay, so now that we've kind of set the tone for who we're speaking to and what type of book, let's get into the weeds on this. So, first of all, what are the elements that agents and publishers expect to see when they are
Right.
receiving proposals?
Right. So let me ground this conversation by saying that this is an absolute standard expectation that almost there's always you always have to put that in there. Almost every agent or almost every publisher who reviews manuscripts without an agent, and there are many good ones who do, they will ask you for a proposal. Now, what is in that proposal? The agent or the publisher might use slightly different language for what they ask you for, but there's almost always a core group of things that you need to put together really well in a really tight, let's say 10 to 12 page package, excluding your sample chapters. And that's a different part of the conversation. You've got to have a really killer overview, which we almost think of as the equivalent of the fiction query letter, which is
Hmm.
to say you're going to get right into the heart of why this book, why now, and why me. It's
Hmm.
really important to make you're really this is a sales document, okay?
Hmm.
You're really selling, you're really trying to grab that agent by the shoulders and basically say, "Hey, hey, this this is important. This story has to be told. This story has to be told now, and I have the background, the expertise, the perspective to tell the story, and I'm the one to tell it." You've got to be incredibly clear, so you get a really clear point of view. You know that you do need a what we call a hook in nonfiction as much as in fiction. So you really have to have a really clear point of view about what the book's really about, what it really means. You have to be extremely clear about who it's for. Who is the reader of this book? You know, and what does it really cover? And that sense of urgency about why this book, why now? This all goes into an overview, which is usually the first thing an agent may skim before they perhaps go take a peek at your sample chapters. But that overview has to get them right away, right? So you get one shot to do that, just like in a fiction query letter. You have one shot to get that agent to give you their 15 seconds to glance at that query. So that's what that piece is. So there are other really important components in a nonfiction book proposal that agent, and when I say agent, I'm still also mean publisher, if that's the route you're going, direct publisher, that they're looking for. They need to know what other titles are sort of what books are in conversation with yours. So that doesn't mean books that are exactly like yours, but it means books that are in a very similar ballpark or are structured in a similar way, or maybe even covering a different topic, but in a similar way. So you have to build a little universe about what's out there that could be named as a competitive title. This is a very pared down list. And we can talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but it is a component that the agent will need to see. You never ever, the kiss of death is to say, well, my book is unique. There's nothing like that out there. You don't ever, ever want to say that because the agent will never believe you. You
Hmm.
need to come up with, because put it this way, one of the best ways to find these comp titles, these we say competitive, but really they're in conversation with, not so much competing with. You
Hmm.
need to go to your local independent bookstore or what remains of your bookstore chain, in the bookstore chain world, and you go find the shelf where your book would sit most comfortably and then look at the company that it keeps. Is it on the shelf for entrepreneurs? Is it on the shelf for psychology and self-help? Is it on the shelf for inspiration, where I think my book coming out in the fall is going to sit on that inspiration shelf? I went and I looked. Whatever the category is, right? If it's a travel book, is it going to go be on the rows with the travel books? If it's a travel book for women, how women can travel alone, there might be a particular shelf that's got three other books that are just kind of like that, then your book goes there. So you want to be really clear about what the competitive titles are. That's important. You need to explain who your audience is. Who is your
Hmm.
primary readership? Is this, parents with kids who have not yet reached adolescence? That's a very specific audience. Is this policymakers, people who are in government and, make and change laws? Is this, you know, people who are going through midlife crisis? I mean, who is the audience? You have to be really clear, and you have to think about a primary audience, a secondary audience, and even like a kind of a tertiary. So this is another one of these things that you have to work on. You have to have a marketing plan, which is, how am I going to support the marketing and sales of this book? What does my platform look like? We can have an entire conversation about that. But like, what is my connection to the world of this book? How do I represent myself and this book in the world of the readers that I'm trying to reach? Because the agents want to see that you're in it. You can't be standing outside of this world and have like zero contact. Like, I can't be an astrophysicist and write a cookbook and think that I'm automatically going to be connected to the world of, cookbook people. Like I got to make that bridge. I got to build that bridge, right? Got to make that clear, right?
Mhm.
But apart from all that, and this is all work, one of the most, if not the most important thing that will go in your proposal is an annotated table of contents. That's where every chapter in the book has its own little descriptive paragraph about what goes on in that chapter. And the chapters have to flow one from the other, and they have to take the reader on some kind of a journey so the reader can really see where this book is going and what the reader is going to get from it by the time they reach the end. This is the hardest piece. This takes the most work. And this is the piece that's really going to cement your sort of reputation as the person to get this job done, because it's going to be clear that you know what you're talking about. So those are a lot. That's not even every single thing, but those are a lot of the really main elements before you even get to the sample chapters. Let me say one more thing. Many people don't realize that when you're pitching a nonfiction book, commercial, straight ahead, nonfiction, you don't have to write the whole book first.
I'm glad you said
This is
that because I was
tricky.
gonna I was gonna bring that up as a point. That's one of the biggest differences between the
Right.
the fiction and
That's
nonfiction
right. That's
submittal
right.
process. Yeah, which is also great because hey, if nobody's showing any interest in your book, gives you the opportunity to say, is it because going the
Right.
agented route is not the right way for me, or is it because the
Right.
book is lacking in something and needs
Exactly.
a wow
Exactly.
factor?
Right. You're exactly right. That what's so difficult here is even if you haven't written chapters, 3 through 10 or whatever, you absolutely must know what is going to be in them. You still
Yes.
have to have a plan because you have to have that annotated table of contents for the whole book. So even if you've only written the intro and chapter 1 and 2 and maybe 3, and maybe you've written a chapter at the end, maybe you've been able to sort of write your way into a conclusion. The whole middle is missing. You still need to know what's going in there. So it's sort of a, the ends, pushing to the middle here, where you still have to have an understanding of that.
Yeah, it's really important. I want to go back to something else that you said that I think, well, two things that I want to talk about here in kind of how you really hone each of these areas of the proposal. But the two questions that popped into my mind were on the audience piece. I'm
Hmm.
really glad that you mentioned how important it is to have it narrowed down very
Yeah.
specifically because this
Yeah.
is one of the areas when I'm working with authors that I see the fear. Actually, I think it's a real fear around trying to niche down because they're afraid that they won't be able to sell enough books if they're super niche. And one of my business coaches, her motto is you get rich in the niche. Like if you're able to really narrow it down to that specific, very, very very sometimes very specific audiences. I worked with an author who wrote a book about women's heart health for women in their 50s and beyond. And when we were talking about her audience, she said, well, everyone's my audience because everyone has a heart. And I was
Wrong
like,
answer.
I can see
Nope.
how you would draw that conclusion. However, you've
Yeah.
already told me in the description, you've already narrowed it down one way that you've said it's
Yeah.
women. And then you've
Yeah.
narrowed it down another way by saying women in their 50s and beyond. So I was like, you've already narrowed it down. You just need to make that narrowing down in all of however you're talking about it because
Right.
it's a completely different. I mean, first of all, you can't market a book it's impossible to market a book for everyone, even if those you're thinking, oh, maybe everyone could be interested in this because they
Hmm.
have a heart. Maybe,
Hmm.
but that's not the way
Hmm.
you win in these proposals. So
So
go
yeah.
ahead.
No, no, I 100% everything you just said, the universal comes from the particular, right? So your book needs to have a very clear point of view for a very particular audience. Now there could be a couple different audiences, but they're clearly defined and there's a reason why they're different. I'm working with someone right now who's a journalist and she's writing an amazing education book, and her book is legitimately for parents in a certain situation. I don't want to say more, but it's more particular than that. Parents of children in a certain situation, that is an audience. But she's got a really clear message for education policymakers as
Mhm.
well. And so
Mhm.
there's a real legitimate sort of bifurcation there. And when you are doing your audience analysis, if you can legitimately quantify an audience size, that is not a bad thing. That is actually a good thing. Like if you could say, let me make up a number. There are, 11.3 million women in America at higher than average risk for heart disease. Like, oh, okay. So this is a real fact. It's a real
Mhm.
statistic based on research. This is who needs this book, not half the population. So
Right.
you want to do this, and the agent, it's a real rookie mistake. Just like saying my book's unique, it's not like anything else, and it's for everybody, or well, it's for women, and women are half the population, so it's for half the. No, if you think that's where you are, you either don't have a clear point of view and your book isn't about anything, or you haven't done the work of figuring out who you are really writing for and who would really read it. Another way to here's another way to get into this point. I always tell my coaching clients, find the reader's pain point and engage with that. So let's
Mhm.
keep on this example. If I have if the women in my family have higher than normal risk of heart disease by or before the age of 50, this is a pain point for me. I'm worried about this. I'm worried about my health. I'm worried about my
Mhm.
sister's health. I'm worried. Who's going to help me with this? Who's going to help me guide me through the thicket? What do I need to know? What do I need to do? I mean, yes, I can go ask my doctor, but I mean, where can I really read up on this? So that book about heart healthy women, or whatever some catchy title it's going to have, that's for me. And so you really want to think about the reader's point of pain, because a lot of nonfiction is trying to address and identify and solve a problem,
Mhm.
not just identify but help solve,
Right.
highlight a problem and help solve, right? And so that always involves there's a pain point somewhere, because problems are painful. So we always need to look for that. And nonfiction authors need to be driving toward that all the time in their work.
Yeah, I think that's yes. And so the thing is when people hear, okay, I can submit a proposal without writing the book, I think that a lot of people will automatically assume that a proposal is going to be easy. But I think having worked with a couple nonfiction authors on proposals, that sometimes writing that proposal can take you longer than actually writing the book if you're doing it well.
And I'm glad you said that, because yes, I work with clients who start from a mere idea, and it can take a long time for us to get to a really tight proposal, because there are
Hmm.
so many questions that have to be answered about structure, point of view, parameters, the research plan. There's a lot that goes into it. And so, yes, you're right. A proposal is not this thing that's like spaghetti that you throw up to see what sticks on the wall.
Right.
It it really is a honed sales document, because you remember the agent is getting scads fees on her desk every day, every week. She's only going to give yours quick once over if you didn't come through a referral.
Yeah.
And even if you came through a referral, there's no guarantee. And so yes, it needs to be, I always say airtight, meaning like we don't want to give them the opportunity to poke holes. Like
Hmm.
you didn't think about X, Y, and Z and it's glaringly obvious. You don't want them to be able to poke holes.
So
Yeah.
you work with authors to create these proposals. How do you help them really hone their proposal so
Right.
that it's ready to go? And do you help them find the people to pitch to as well?
Right. So as a book coach, there's a number of things that I do with authors, and it really depends on where that author is in his or her journey. I work with a lot of nonfiction authors on really moving from an idea to tapping their expertise, so that they can structure a book and get all the way through to the proposal process. And then I absolutely can help them come up with an agent pitch strategy and go all the way, into working into that marketplace. I've helped authors rewrite book proposals to be just better, sharper, clearer,
Hmm.
so that they're more attractive to the marketplace. A lot of my work really is in helping that author do all the structural and work and planning, that before you even can craft the proposal,
Hmm.
developing the annotated table of contents, figuring out what is the real point of view in this book, what is the meaning, what is your thesis, what is your manifesto, what is your call to action, working really deeply on making sure that we are, in a sense, making meaning. So I will provide a lot of guidance, structure, support through regular meetings, questions, and tools in working with this author and stepping them through that process. they're doing the writing, but I'm
Mhm.
doing a lot of the sort of the guidance and asking them the hard questions along the way. I always say a book coach is both an accountability partner and a great source of encouragement and also a guide. And
Yeah.
those are the areas that I work in to help them on that path.
I think that's really great. You mentioned that you started talking about comp titles and how to help people find them and why those are so important. We didn't you mentioned going to the bookstore and seeing where it fits in there, but can you dig in a little more on the importance of those comp titles and what people are looking for when they're looking at those comp titles, and then if you have any
Yes.
resources that can help with that?
Yes. Well, there's resources more like strategy because no two authors are going to need the same comp title list.
Hmm.
First of all, from a nuts and bolts perspective, the good news is you don't need to put in more than 4 to 6 comp titles in your proposal. This is not meant to be a list of every book that's been published. You should have a short list that's truly compellingly comparable for specific reasons, and you can annotate that briefly in your proposal. You know, this book is, this book covers similar topics to mine, but this book is also heavily weighted toward the financial aspect, and I don't deal with finance. I deal instead with X. So you can differentiate. You're not. It's not a hard and fast compare and contrast. It's showing the universe. It's like you're in a pond with a bunch of different fish, and some might be goldfish, some might be koi, some might be some other things. And so they're all fish and they're all in the same pond, but they're also different. And
Hmm.
so, and they're not really in competition because if one ate the other, they wouldn't all be in the pond together. But they're in conversation with each other, right? And they're also kind of going after the same food, I guess. But imperfect analogy. Um, but so finding comparable titles for your book really is sort of an art, and I have a lot of conversations with other writers and clients about this because the tendency is to go to try to find that book, and by the way, your comp title should not be older than say 3 years
Okay.
unless if there's a standing bestseller that's been in print for 15, 20 years that's extremely spot on for you, you could include a title like that.
Hmm.
When I was researching my own proposal for the book that I have coming out in the fall, I really thought long and hard about whether to go into the perennial bestseller that might have been published a long time ago, and why am I calling that out as a comp for my book? And the case I was making is this book of inspiration for writers has been a bestseller and remained in print for X number of years, pointing to the sense that there's a longevity on the shelf for this kind of book.
Hmm.
Then my other comp titles are going to be much more recent that are books, in my case, it's around inspiration for creative people and artists. Others might be illustrated. Mine is illustrated too. Others might not be illustrated. So you're going to find kind of the pool you're swimming in. And believe it or not, what I'm doing is to help clients. Here's the dirty secret. Honest to goodness, you can use Google. I mean, I'm sure you can use AI too. I'm sure you can use ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever. I'm sure you can. But you can use Google to basically say nonfiction books about X and start putting in search terms, and it will come up beautifully with a whole string of book covers. And then what I do is I start a deep dive using Amazon as the essentially as the research library, and I'll
Hmm.
go in and I'll see what that book is really about. I'll look to see if it was like really highly reviewed. I'll look to
Hmm.
see when it came out. So there is some research you can do here right from your own laptop. You just want to be mindful about what you're really calling a comp.
Yeah.
And so
And I would assume you do want to make sure that you're choosing books that are selling well and being reviewed, because that's really, and my assumption is that when agents are looking at this, they're not only wanting to make sure that you know where your book fits into the marketplace, but it's also like, is there proof, is there social proof that these books sell and that there's a market for them?
yes, I think within reason. It doesn't mean you're only supposed to put bestsellers on your comp list. Not at
Hmm.
all. I mean, look, if I found a great comp that on Amazon only had, let's say, 45 reviews, but it's like really spot on in terms of what this book accomplished is really similar to what I'm accomplishing in scope, maybe or whatever, I still include it. It does
Okay.
so it doesn't need to be just bestsellers.
Okay.
As I say, if there is that one bestseller or that perennial bestseller, it was published in 1995 and it's still, still in print. Like, if like say What Color Is Your Parachute, which is like one of those best-selling books about kind of trying to figure out what kind of work or career you're suited to, right? It's been in print forever, like decades. If I were doing a book that somehow was about career search or finding your identify into the working world, it might make sense for me to put that book on the
Hmm.
list with a note as to why, the interest in, figuring out our work identities never flags, as this book, shows. Only one. I wouldn't do more than that
Okay.
of that vein, right? Because you're not saying I'm going to be the next. What color is your parachute? Don't make the claim, but you're showing that there's a lot of interest in your niche.
How long should people devote to writing a proposal?
Well, the flippant answer is that depends on whether you have a book coach helping you or not. Um,
It's not flippant though, because anytime I'm a big proponent of hiring professionals to help you do
to
the
help,
stuff
right?
that's going to
Right,
take you
right,
so
right,
much time to
right.
do on your own.
It
But yes.
this entirely depends on where you are in your journey as an expertise who may have already developed some of this material or not. So, for
Mhm,
example, if you're in academia and you're a real expert in your field and you've written and published scads on this topic, and now you want to try and push something made out to a more commercial market rather than academic market, you may already have a ton of information, material, ideas, themes at your fingertips that you just need to sort of shape for commercial purposes. You might already kind of be already on second or third base, so to speak, and you just have to kind of get over to home plate. So
mhm,
it really depends. It's not a short process. This can be an intensive several weeks to an intensive several months. Now, that's excluding the sample chapters that go with a proposal. This is what takes the longest.
mhm,
It's one thing to be getting the nuts and bolts of the proposal together. Some agents want 2 chapters, some want 3. Some want a beginning chapter and an ending chapter, which is really hard if you haven't written the whole book. Some, like, you can't just give them intro in chapter 1. They think like, "Well, you got started, but I don't know, you haven't convinced me you know where it's going." So,
mhm,
you need to be prepared for that kind of a response. You may find an agent might be interested. Maybe you submitted intro, chapter 1, 2, maybe even a 3, and they say, "This is interesting. I'd like to see a later chapter in the book where you deal with solutions or where you deal with the case studies that you referred to early on. I'd like to see that chapter." Well, you may have to go off and write that chapter. But you've got to be prepared for that kind of thing. And so there's no hard and fast rule as to how long this takes because honestly, it takes what it takes, and you
mhm,
should not go into the marketplace until it's just really, really, really good.
mhm. All right. Well, that's good to know. I think it's not something that can be taken as the easy button. Like it's got to, and you know what?
Correct.
Even this is a different segue here, but I will often tell people, even if they never have any plans on submitting to an agent or publisher, to spend the time to do a book proposal anyway, because it becomes kind of your business strategy, your business proposal, your how you're going to go about doing the rest of it. Because I find that a lot of people have these ideas for great books, but they're scattered in what's included. There's too many people. They
That's
don't know
right.
their audience. So as we were discussing before, when it comes to time to market the book, they don't know how to build those readers. They don't know how to do those things. So
Right.
I would encourage anybody who's writing a nonfiction book to spend some time putting together, at least looking at what should be in a proposal and spending the time to do all of these
Right.
things we just talked about.
You're absolutely right because, well, first of all, you need it if you're going to be serious about going into the marketplace, and
Hmm.
even if for any reason, even if you ultimately decide to self-publish, you still need the point of view, the structure, and the thematic
Hmm.
integrity that comes out of this process. So
Right.
one way or the other, you've got to answer these questions, one way or the other. So yes, that's true. And even if you're an entrepreneur and your goal is to essentially self-publish with the help of a company who will put this together for you so that you can sell books at your conferences and trade shows and that kind of thing, you still need to go through these steps to create a quality product.
Absolutely. All right. So now that you've gotten everybody fired up and ready to go and wanting to do a book proposal, I would love if you would share. Do you have resources that people can go to? Do you have a course? Do you have how can they learn more about you and get in touch with you for help?
Well, I love having just no obligation conversations with anyone who thinks they've got a great idea for a nonfiction book. They don't have to have written a word yet. It's all about your commitment to this process and how strongly you feel about developing the idea. And so people can reach me at Word First Book Coaching. And it's wordfirstbookcoach.com. That's Word First. It's also on the screen above my head, if they're watching as opposed to just listening. WORDFIRST, wordfirstbookcoach.com. That's my coaching website. And I welcome anyone. You do not have to have written a book before. I love working with folks who are stepping into this from their own expertise, not as writers, but as subject matter experts. That's one of the things I love about nonfiction. And I'll help you find your why, which is one of the really, really big
Mhm.
places that we need to start. Why you? Why this book? Why now? That's where every conversation starts.
Wonderful. And are you on social media or LinkedIn or any other places
All
like that?
over,
All
all
over.
over, all over.
Word
Yes.
First Book Coach.
Yes, Amy L. Bernstein. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Substack. I'm doing all the things.
Wonderful. That's so great. Well, thank you so much, Amy. This was a great conversation. I think it really helps people to get a bigger grasp on what they're trying to accomplish as they move into writing and publishing and selling their nonfiction books. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Alexa. It was a great conversation. You asked wonderful questions, and I really appreciated it.
Thank you.
You don't have to give me your heart. You don't have to give it away. You don't
Thank you for joining us on the Publisher Podcast. We hope to see you back for the next episode. Great, huge thanks goes to Jasmine Commerce for the use of her song. You can find Jasmine on SoundCloud. Go check out all of her music. We'll see you next time.